Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Crystal, what's on the show today?
So much good stuff in the show today. We've got Jeff Weaver, top Bernie Sanders campaign aide, on the show to talk about what their plan is going forward. We got a bunch of new polls. We got to look at the different candidates' coalitions. But most importantly, guys, we hit 50,000 subscribers. Thank you. Exciting day.
Right.
All that and more today on Rising. What are you looking at?
Well, the New York Times editor-in-chief, Dean Baquet, he can't even hold an employee town hall without one of his own staffers leaking a recording of it to Slate. The transcript of the nearly 70-minute discussion is worth reading in full to digest how one of this country's leading institutions is in complete free fall and will never be the paper of record again. What emerges is a sad tale of a presumably younger woke staffers pressuring their African-American editor-in-chief to please call President Trump a racist on their front page. Baquet painfully tries to maintain some level of objectivity in his explanations and admitting to his employees that their readers cheer the paper when they take on Donald Trump, but get upset if they critically cover Joe Biden. Despite this, he claims the New York Times will be independent in this election and for the remainder of its future. Color me very skeptical. The truth is that New York Times has made itself profitable through exactly the same mechanism that won't let it be independent. Millions of upper middle class white liberals signed up for the New York Times because they marketed themselves as opponents to Donald Trump. This is obvious in much of their coverage of the White House, but Democrats should be just as concerned. Who do you think that these upper middle class white liberals love in the 2020 primary? Go take a look at the Democratic electorate support. You'll see Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker. Who do you think gets great coverage in the so-called paper of record? I want to emphasize, no one journalist will ever get a direct order to provide favorable coverage, but they can see which of their stories get the most traffic, reader comments, reception, love amongst the cable news syndicate, getting booked on reliable sources. They're smart people. They're responding to existing incentives. Guess who loses under the system? Donald Trump, people like Bernie Sanders, anybody who liked having a paper that just told you what the heck happened yesterday without pandering to any one group. The subscription reliance by the New York Times has destroyed their claim to be the paper of record. Just take a look at the recent incident where they chose a relatively anodyne headline to describe President Trump's remarks after El Paso, then they changed it in their second printing after widespread outrage on Twitter. The public editor of the New York Times is now its own subscribers, and that's why claims of independence and objectivity need to be scrutinized by us very carefully. And now, Crystal,
Yeah.
I know that there's an impulse to be like, oh, but the Times and they were just going after Trump. But we've talked about here about institutionalized media bias against the progressive left. The truth is it's about consolidating and keeping class power for the upper class. Yeah. That is what the paper of record, so-called, is.
It's about responding to class interests, which is why there is such a fixation on, and look, I think these things are important. I'm not saying they're not important, but why there was such a fixation on Russia.
Exactly.
When if you
and he admitted it in there. He said our whole newsroom was staffed to go after Trump Russia.
Right. And then now the fixation is on the president's racism, which, again, these are important stories, especially when you have a spike in white nationalist violence. That is an important trend. However, there are other important things going on, too. There's a climate crisis that disproportionately affects communities of color. There's a water crisis. There is a health crisis. There is an automation crisis. There is a deindustrialization. There's what trade has wrought for our country. Like, there are a lot of topics that need to be focused on. And if you ask the American working class what they wanted to see in their paper, it wouldn't be Russia and racism.
That's exactly what we're talking about here, which is where they do these silly pieces where they parachute into Cincinnati and talk to like 55 people.
Like they're going on safari.
Exactly. It's literally like a safari-based thing. It's like, I don't know, maybe hire like a Cincinnati-based reporter who like lives there with working people and tells the story of unions and factories and
I don't even think they have a labor reporter anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but how many race reporters do you think they have? How much money, millions of dollars, are they pouring into this current slavery project? How many millions of dollars are they pouring into having bloggers just look for viral racial incidents incidents, what they can make go viral amongst their people just to continue subscribers. They have like 10 White House correspondents. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that these aren't important things to talk about. And by the way, that headline that they changed was trash and needed to be changed, in my personal opinion.
Right, but that's what I mean.
But it's the balance of coverage and what you're leaving off the table, what you're not focusing on, and the ideas, and also, as you point out, the candidates that you consider to be sort of out of bounds or look your nose down at because they don't make up your subscriber base.
There you go.
Next on Rising, Bernie Sanders' 2020 senior advisor Jeff Weaver tells us how the campaign views the primary so far. He also explains what the Bernie write-off is.
And one of the many areas Joe Biden's team is doing damage control on, his support with Latinos. Hill reporter Rafael Bernal describes the behind-the-scenes moves and how activists have responded as Rising continues.